Women.
Okay, root first, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Lillian Ngoyi, Shalek Matleke, Francis Bard, Rahima Musa, Helen Joseph, and Denny Silinga. You know these names. Trust me, you know these names. Because these are your streets, roads, hospitals, and airports if the EFF finally succeeds in renaming Cape Town Airport. But do you know their stories? No, it's wait. Do you know who these women were and what they sacrificed? These are the women who built, fought, and died for South Africa. And since it's Women's Month, why don't we tell those stories? Let me start with probably the least known name here. Let me introduce you to Annie Silinga. Born in 1910 in Nqamakwe, a village near Ecuwa, as part of the Transkei Homeland Reserve, which formed part of the 13% reserve for native in the Union and later Apartheid South Africa, she did not have much of an education. She was functionally illiterate for most of her life and had only spent a few years in primary school. She spent 27 years in the Transkei at the time of relative prosperity, but overpopulation and overgrazing basically led to soil erosion and poverty. So in 1937, she moved to Cape Town with her husband, Mateu, and 5 children because, in her own words, my babies had been dying in Transkei. As a professional hater of the homelands, anyone who always glorifies the homelands as if they were like bastions of black superiority disgusts me. Anyway, so she moved to keep them alive. That's the entire point. She moved to keep her children alive. This was the first time she and her entire family could live together. Because if you don't know anything about Apartheid South Africa, you should know that the culture of men going to work in the cities whilst women raise children, and why most children are raised by women and their grandparents. This is it. Like, very few children who grew up in rural South Africa know both their parents. If they do, they are lucky. After World War II, the family moved to Langa Township due to some zoning laws, which still are present today.
No, xa kuthiwa eKapa kuthiwa niza apha bamba anisi apha niza apha siKapa apha Cape Town lena Cape Town siKapa.
So here's the thing about living in the states of a singular tribal group for your whole life and then moving to a city like Cape Town or Johannesburg or Durban or Port Elizabeth, right? It will radicalize you. I won't explain how, but you start realizing that village life is actually peaceful. If you didn't need to leave to survive, most people will stay in the village. And this was the case for not so little Annie. In the late 1940s, Annie began attending community meetings discussing measures to improve conditions in the community. In 1948, she joined the Langa Vigilance Authority to protect the residents from apartheid laws. In 1952, she joined the ANC and immediately got arrested. I'm not joking. She joined and started a 6-month-long civil disobedience campaign against the National Party, took part in the defiance campaign against past laws, and she served some jail time, along with her 6-month-old baby. 6-month-old baby. Yeah, a kid was an ex-convict at 6 months old. The more you know about the government. In 1953, she was part of the core group of women that created FEDSO, the Federation of South African Women, to capitalize on the outrage of women against apartheid past laws. At their first conference, she was elected as part of FEDSO's National Executive Committee, the NEC. Quick side note, every time I hear the word NEC, I just think of the ANC, and they really ruined the word for me. At this same conference, they wrote the Women's Charter, which is, I think, the most telling idea of apartheid was a simple statement she made about past laws, and quote, "I will never carry a pass. I'll carry one similar to Miss Stradum's." She was talking about Susan Stradum. I don't know who she was. She's a woman, and so am I. And that is the whole past chat explained. She wanted to move freely in the country and did not see why she should not be allowed to do so when other women were allowed just because they have a different skin color. She broke a lot of these past laws and was subsequently banished to the Transkei in 1956, but immediately came back illegally to be with her family. In 1957, she successfully appealed based on her 15 years of residency and was allowed to remain in Cape Town. Let's go back a few months later, on the 9th of August 1956. This is one of my favorite days because I always say this: thank God for women giving us the only public holiday in August. 5 weeks with no break would actually kill me. On this very important day, Annie was one of the women that led 20,000 women that marched to the Union buildings in Pretoria to protest the past laws. It is one of the most important days in South African history, and I made funny enough, that was the very first video I made on this channel. It is one of the most important days in South African history. After this, she was arrested alongside other leaders such as Lillian Ngoyi, Helen Joseph, as well as Oliver Tambo, Ahmed Gadrada, Ruth First, Chief Albert Lutuli, and Nelly M, amongst like 140 others. She was released when charges were dropped for like hundreds of them. I forgot. I did not write it down. In 1958, she was elected president of the ANC Women's League for Cape Town, and in 1960, a state of emergency was declared by the apartheid government after protests in Langa and Sharpeville. Made a video about those. She was arrested during the time as a member of the ANC, which had been banned then, and she got released from prison and was involved with the formation of the Women's Front and was the patron of the UDF, United Democratic Front. In 1983, she lived her whole life and never carried the past. She died in 1984 in Bogota. When I started researching this video, I had no idea who Annie Silinga was. I only knew her from this picture, and it's easy to see why. She forms part of the hundreds of thousands of women who suffered whilst fighting the apartheid government and who probably never be mentioned alongside Abu Winnie or Mandela. She was buried in an unmarked grave with a piece by artist Sue Williamson in the Langa Cemetery written, "I'll never carry past." This was approved by her family to mark her grave. She only has a street in Philippi I can find named after her. I'm not sure if anyone has anything about Annie Silinga that is used to commemorate her. Please, I'd really like to know if we as a country have done more to celebrate a person like her. She's in history books. There are paintings about her. She's the definition of empowered. By the way, empowered is a rock.